I had no idea that when I went to the hospital on the evening of December 15th, that I would be having my son that day, that he would spend the rest of his life in the NICU, and that I was about to embark on a grief journey that would change the course of my life. Share more with you about my personal story, the things that I've gone through, and how I've decided and chosen to overcome my loss, to be inspired by my grief, and to make something new. So first, let me introduce you to my son, Jackson Robert. This is my favorite photo of him and the one that I keep. What you might not know is that the day that this picture was taken was really the first day that I saw my son's face completely, because he had either been on a ventilator or on a CPAP machine. Let me take you back. Oh my goodness. So this was back in 2009. Was when I decided that we were ready to get pregnant and I wanted to have a baby. I was getting older. I was 39 at the time, and I wanted a baby, and I thought that all I needed was a baby to make my life perfect. I had gotten married the year before. We had the house. There wasn't a picket fence, but honestly, life was good. We had money in the bank. I had a career. Things were good. And so we got to a point where I said, I'm finally ready. I'm ready to have a baby. And so what I didn't know was that it was going to be hard to get pregnant. What I didn't know was that my first pregnancy was going to be a miscarriage. They call it a missed miscarriage because basically the baby dies in utero, and I didn't know, and my body still thought I was pregnant. And so we didn't know until I went to the doctor and couldn't find a heartbeat on an ultrasound. And that was my first real experience with knowing what grief was like. And I grieved that baby. I call that baby Baby Love. We did some genetic testing. I know that baby was a boy. It was really hard, but I was 39 and I didn't have time. I didn't have time to wait, that if I wanted to have a baby, I needed to get pregnant again. And I also didn't know that, again, it was going to be difficult. So I did what I could. I used the resources that I had. My degree was in biochemistry and molecular biology. I believed in science, I believed in medicine, and I went to fertility doctors and said, I need to be pregnant. I managed to get pregnant. I was over the moon, excited. I was finally gonna have everything that I wanted. I didn't know that he was going to come 3 months early. He was due on March 17th of 2011, but he came to us when I went into labor on December 15th of 2010. So that was a full 3 months too early. Shortly after Jackson was born, he had a pulmonary hemorrhage. And that pulmonary hemorrhage, we didn't know at the time, but basically had did something to his brain that was not good. I didn't know, I didn't understand. I was trying to understand the science, the medicine, but even the doctors didn't know. They couldn't tell me whether or not he was going to be okay. They told me that it was touch and go, that he could die, but I never thought for even a second that he actually would, because these are the things that don't happen to us. These are the things that happen to other people. And we say to ourselves, oh my gosh, I can't imagine what that would be like. Well, I did imagine what that would be like. We spent quite a while in the NICU. I sat by his bedside all day long in one of those large, uncomfortable chairs. And if you've been in those chairs, you know what I'm talking about. You're not allowed to sleep in the NICU, but you can be there. And so literally, if you fall asleep, they have to wake you up. And so I stayed all day, my husband stayed all night, and I just sat there and I watched him. And I was looking in my book. He was born on December 15th, but I did not hold him. This was the first time that I held him. I did not hold him until December 31st. So he was more than 15 days old before I held him. Everything about being in the NICU was a challenge. It was so hard. But we had so much hope. Like I said, we wanted to believe that everything would be okay. We wanted to believe that his digestive system would improve, that his lungs would function. Again, these are all the things that premature infants struggle with. They struggle to breathe. They struggle to digest food. Infants that are born prematurely, they don't like to be touched. There's too much stimulation for them. They want it to be dark. They want it to be quiet. And he developed a brain bleed. And with infants, because their brains their skull is not fused back together, there was a buildup of cerebral fluid. They call that hydrocephalus. And his head started to swell. His head started to get bigger. And so they told me that they needed to relieve the pressure. They didn't know the damage yet that was done to his brain that we would find out later. But they told us that they needed to do brain surgery, that they needed to release the pressure. So they told me that they were going to drill a hole in my baby's head. And I didn't know how I was going to get through that. But somehow I did. There was a lot of prayers. Literally, I did not want to leave his bedside. And for most of the time that he was alive, I didn't. We were very fortunate to live across the street from Rady Children's Hospital at the Ronald McDonald House. That is a place that I will forever be blessed to have been able to visit and stay there and be part of that community. I later volunteered there, and it was a beautiful, beautiful experience. I calculated it out that it was 2 minutes from the bed that I was in to my son's bedside if I needed to be there and if I ran at full speed. I was scared to death to leave him. I didn't want anything to happen. There was a time before, shortly after I had had him, when they had to transport him and they were taking him in an ambulance, and I wasn't allowed to be with him. And there was this period of time when I didn't know if he was going to live. I didn't know if he was going to make it, but we prayed and we got there and he was okay. And so we stayed in the NICU for 42 days and 42 nights. It was around Christmas time, right? Because he was born on December 15th, like I said, and everything about Christmas. It was the holiday season. There was music playing. It was people trying to be somewhat cheerful, but I was not the only one at the hospital who had an infant that was there. There was a desire and a longing to feel joy and to feel happiness, but it was so hard with the heaviness of the situation that most of the kids were in. And this one time I found this one time I was walking through the hospital and somebody asked me, do you have a child here? And I said, yes. And they handed me this little bear, which I still cry because I remember when they gave it to me. It still brings tears to my eyes. But if you look on it, it says, Jesus loves you. And it still makes me cry. There's a lot that I don't remember. I have flashbacks from the period of time, but one of the things that we did while I was there was we had an online website so that I could share what was going on with all of the people who cared about us, who cared about Jackson. And it was much easier and better than trying to keep everyone informed. And so I would post there daily. And I went back this year and I started looking at some of them. I haven't read all of them in a lot of years, just because it brings back a lot. But on January 19th of 2011, I wrote this journal entry And I want to try to read it to you because it gives you a sense of where we were, what we were at. And I said, I'd like to begin this entry with a huge thank you for all of the prayers and well wishes. Jackson is truly blessed to have so many who love him. It is with a heavy heart that Jim and I need to share with all of you our devastating news. Tests yesterday revealed that significant damage was done to his brain during the pulmonary hemorrhage that occurred. Although Jackson was showing signs of improvement and growth, the vital signs we are watching, his breathing, his eating, his digestion, are autonomic brain functions and require only minimal brain activity to occur. Upon further testing, multiple brain scans showed that the damage that did occur was so significant that Jackson will never be able to advance beyond the capabilities of an infant. We will continue to be with Jack right through to the end and ask for continued prayers of strength to help us through the coming weeks. We feel honored and thankful to have shared the last 5 weeks with him and cherish every moment that we spent. Our love for our son continues to grow, and although the coming weeks will be challenging for us, we are happy to have gotten to know him and to love him. And I said, I will continue to journal entries when I can, because at that point we knew that things weren't good. But we wanted to believe that maybe there would be a miracle. Maybe something would happen, that he would be okay. On the 21st, which was 5 days before he passed, I wrote the serenity prayer. That was, God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And there was an incident. There was an incident that happened. We were kind of waiting. We didn't know how long Jackson was going to live. And we were just waiting, and we were spending time and trying to be in the moment and cherish what we had with him. And on the 25th, he had an incident where his heart stopped and he stopped breathing at the same time. And there were so many bells, so many alarms going off. He stopped breathing and all of the doctors came rushing in. And the lights were on and they were pushing me, which I couldn't understand. They were pushing me away from my son. And I remember thinking, if he is going to die, he needs to be with me. I need to be with him. They brought him back. But I remembered the things that they told me in the NICU, the things that these amazing nurses would tell me. That he wanted it to be dark. He wanted it to be quiet. He wanted it to be peaceful. He didn't want people touching them. And as his mother, I knew that he wanted me. Or maybe I wanted him. Jackson taught me what it meant to be a mother that day. Because we decided that this was not how his life was going to end. We had been told that he was not going to live long term, that there was no hope, that he was going to die, and we were kind of waiting. And after that incident, he went back on a ventilator, and the ventilator was so terrible. It shook his whole little body. It was just too much. It was too much, and I didn't want that for him. And although I wanted to keep him around for me, I knew that wasn't the best thing. But we opted to remove life support. We had made the decision. We knew that it was the right thing to do. As difficult as it was, or when we were removing life support, that they were going to do it at night, when it was quiet, when it was dark. We had soft music playing. Only I and my husband were touching him, and we held him. And we held him until he passed. And before that evening, I didn't know what to post because I knew it was happening. And I had grown up Catholic. I learned all of the prayers. I learned all of the things. I did what I was supposed to do to be a good Catholic. And when this all was happening, the only thing that I could think of and the only place that I could go in my deepest, darkest moment was to prayer. And it was to the memory, if you know that prayer. And it says, "Remember, O most gracious Virgin Mary, that never was it known that anyone who fled to your protection, implored your help, or sought your intercession was left unaided. Inspired by this confidence, I fly unto you, O Virgin of Virgins, my mother. To you do I come, before you I stand, sinful and sorrowful. O Mother of the Word incarnate, despise not my petitions, but in your mercy, hear and answer them." That was all I could get out that day. And then I went off to be with my son. And we held him through the end. I gave him to the nurse that had taken care of him for so long. She was a beautiful soul, and she said, "Is it okay if I love on him for a little longer?" Which was such a gift that she said that. And it made me feel comfortable to hand him to her. And that was the last time that I saw him. And here's the funny thing about being in a NICU. I had spent 42 days and 42 nights in the NICU. And living at the Ronald McDonald House, that had become my life. There wasn't anything else. That was all I focused on. But when you don't have a child in the NICU, you no longer belong in the NICU. You no longer belong at the Ronald McDonald House. I left the hospital without my son. I left the Ronald McDonald House, the place that I had known for the last 6 weeks. Another loss on top of the loss that we had just experienced. And I had no idea what was to come. I knew that it was 6 weeks to the day that he passed away. And I had a doctor's appointment because here's the thing, you always have your 6-week checkup. And so I went to that checkup because I didn't know what else to do. I wanted to make sure that I was okay, that I could have another baby. Because I knew that my story wasn't over. I knew that I was going to grieve. I knew that I was devastated. But I didn't want to quit. I didn't want to quit even then. I remember the doctor thinking, asking me, "Why are you here?" And I was like, where else would I be? Where else would I go? And the tears are still come on so strong. Not because I haven't grieved, but because I continue to grieve. And because the situation with him was so powerful and so emotional. And thinking back to those times, my brain remembers my thoughts and my brain remembers the emotions, and the emotions come flooding back. It's why we all continue to grieve for a long time after we lost our loved one. But I knew back then that I was going to figure it out. I didn't know how I was going to figure it out, but I knew I had to figure it out. There wasn't another alternative. I needed to learn how to grieve. I needed to figure it out. I stayed very depressed for a long time because I couldn't do anything else. I didn't know that there was a solution. I didn't know that I needed to grieve, that I needed to get my grief out. I didn't know that I would ever be okay. It's part of the reason why I do what I do now. Is I want people to know that you can be okay. You can survive your loss. You can survive your grief. And your grief can inspire you to do something. Do something for yourself. Do something for the people that you love. Do something for the world. It really doesn't matter what. But you have to do something because you can't just stay stuck in your grief. And when I see people who stay stuck for longer than they need to, it hurts my heart. So my mission is to help people move forward, to learn about grief and loss, to keep going, to know that there are more chapters of their life. And yes, there will be a very strong delineation between before your loss and after your loss, and that will never change. I still think of my life before Jackson, after Jackson. But the point is that there's an after. And I decided that I wanted to do something different. And what I knew was how to get educated. I knew how to go to school. I knew how to learn. And so I started to learn. It was after I had given birth to my next son, Mason, who's 11 now. At 6 weeks, that same 6-week number, I had to go back to work. The thought of leaving him evoked all of the same emotions as that time when I handed my son to the nurse and never saw him again. And it created panic attacks in me. Panic attacks were so big that I had to seek help because I didn't know how I was going to function. And my therapist taught me that I had more control than I thought I did, which is one of the grief-inspired mantras today. She taught me to learn about my grief. She taught me to learn about myself and how this was affecting me. She taught me what my values were and what was most important. And she taught me how to get on a path to start finding meaning and purpose for my life. And the journey continues to unfold. But my loss story and my grief inspired me to start a YouTube channel. It inspired me to go and sit with mothers who have lost their infants and remind them that they were going to be okay too. That you can lose a child and you can be okay. You can lose the people that mean the most to you and you can be okay. I shared my story anywhere that I could. And I started my YouTube channel so that I could talk to people and share the things that I wish I had known and to talk to people about loss. I read books. I watched videos. I read articles. I listened to podcasts. And I grew. I was fortunate to stumble upon personal development. It wasn't just learning about my grief. It was about learning about myself and growing me and really finding that meaning and the purpose that I was desperately searching for. And I found that in Grief Inspired. And it's been all of these years where I've continued to post videos and I started doing courses and I started talking to people about loss. And I tried to bring people together to say, we can do this. And I've developed 10 grief-inspired mantras. I'll drop them in the comments so you can see what those are. I wrote a journal because that's what people needed. People needed a place to share. And I kept going. And I continue to go. And I've been growing me enough so that I can help more people. And that journey is continuing on. I was blown away by a meeting that we had today where we get together to talk about our loss, to talk about our grief, to talk about how to move forward, how to live with loss. Again, grief is all about love. The more you love, the more that you grieve. And I was blown away to be in a meeting with people who have continued to share how I've changed their life, how I've made a difference for them, how they've gotten hope, and they've started to learn about themselves, and they've started to grow, and they recite some of the things that I say back to me now. It really is a miracle that I, this one little person from the suburbs of Pittsburgh, could impact lives in the way that I do. I'm truly blessed. Jackson did that for me. Jackson gave me meaning and purpose and has put me on a course that continues to grow and expand, and it hasn't been easy. There's been a lot that has not been easy. Grief is not easy, but it is necessary. Overcoming your grief in a way that lets it sit in your heart, in a way that doesn't destroy you, is a gift. We get educated on our grief. We deal with personal development. We grow ourselves. And we get our grief out. And we do it in community. I've created a community of people that is phenomenal. I get to sit every week with these amazing men and women who have massively compassionate hearts, who know the pain and the suffering of loss, but who choose gratitude, who choose positivity, who choose to do the work of grief so that they can find meaning. And then they share it with other people. And they start pulling the people along who are earlier in their loss. And that happens. And I was able to witness it today in a way that I've never noticed before. And it was so incredibly powerful. And I feel so incredibly grateful. This is a gift that has been given to me, and I am forever grateful. If you have experienced loss and you're working to get through it, you are my people. Come and hang out with us. Come and join us. The Grief Inspired community on the school.com platform is the place where we are headed. It is the place where we will share, where we will grow, where we will build a community of people who support each other, who know loss, and who are finding meaning in even the smallest moments of their lives.